Chapter 59 Bhagavan in Kitchen. Some of the spiritual seekers who had originally come to Tiruvannamalai to pursue their spiritual practices under the guidance of Bhagavan, through force of circumstances, had to take up the kitchen responsibility. On the whole, these people were quite content with the situation because they considered it a privilege to cook the food that Bhagavan partook of. However, they could not help feeling envious of those devotees who were fortunate enough to spend all their time in meditation in Bhagavan's presence with easy access to his guidance and advice. At times, the kitchen staff felt quite frustrated at their confinement to the kitchen. Bhagavan was aware of this. Being the very embodiment of compassion, he found a way to satisfy the longings of the kitchen staff. He made it a point to visit the kitchen on his way to the cowshed and would often spend a fair amount of time talking to the cooks and helpers. He would give instructions and suggestions. At times, he would even assist the cooks in their work. Sometimes, Bhagavan would take a portion of some item and taste it. Then he would distribute a little of it among the others and ask for their opinions. Oh, what a bliss to be offered something directly from the sacred hands of the Master. Whenever something went wrong in the kitchen, Bhagavan would set it right. Once, the cooks were perplexed when they found that the dal, in spite of boiling for an unusually long period, just could not be made soft enough to mash. In South Indian cooking, dal is an important ingredient of many dishes. For example, sambar requires that well-cooked dal is added to the vegetables boiled in tamarind water. Understandably, the cooks were becoming quite desperate because the delay in preparing the dal would mean a delay in getting the meal ready. Bhagavan entered the kitchen just then. Taking in the situation, he said to the cook, "Add some salt to the dal." The cook protested, saying, "Dal only becomes harder if salt is added to it before it is fully cooked." Bhagavan did not waste any time in further talk. He simply scooped up a handful of salt from the container and sprinkled it over the boiling dal. Within minutes, the dal was a soft, mushy mixture ready to be mixed with the other ingredients. Everyone was amazed because the common belief is that the addition of salt interferes with the process of cooking and delays the softening up of the dal. On another occasion, Bhagavan found that the sambar had too much salt in it. He instructed the cook to shape some cooked rice into a big ball, flatten it a little and drop it into the boiling hot sambar. Bhagavan told the kitchen staff that the rice would absorb the excess salt and the sambar was exceptionally delicious that day. Varanasi Subbalakshmi used to say, "When you looked at Bhagavan reclining on the sofa in the meditation hall, surrounded by his devotees, you were reminded of Lord Krishna holding court in Mathura. While Bhagavan was in the kitchen, however, he was like Lord Krishna in Gokulam, sporting with the simple cowherd folk." Bhagavan entered the kitchen very early in the morning, while most of the devotees were still asleep, and completed the tasks like cutting the vegetables and grinding spices and chutneys. One morning, Bhagavan was preparing to grind the coconut chutney to be served with the idlis at breakfast time. Anticipating Bhagavan's actions, Muruganar darted forward and took hold of the vertical stone that rotates within the cavity of the circular grinding stone. Muruganar started rotating the vertical stone while Bhagavan settled down opposite and slowly pushed the coconut and other ingredients into the gap. While this activity was going on, Bhagavan was talking about the early days. He said, "While we were staying on the hill, Mother often remarked that a grinding stone would be a big help. I invariably replied that once a grinding stone was acquired, some other appliance would appear indispensable and there would be no end to such requirements. I used to tell Mother that by acquiring one object after the other, we will only bind ourselves much more tightly to this earthly life." Bhagavan's voice had a mesmeric effect upon Muruganar. Though his hands continued their mechanical activity, his mind was far away. He did not even notice that the chutney was ready. He just continued to rotate the stone. To catch his attention, Bhagavan splashed some water onto his face under the pretext of sprinkling water over the chutney. Even then, Muruganar did not recognize the situation. He assumed that Bhagavan was sprinkling water on the ingredients and some of the water had accidentally splashed into his eyes. So he just wiped his face with a towel and continued with his activity. At that point, Bhagavan exclaimed, "What is this? Can't you see that the task is done? Why persist with the grinding when the chutney is ready?" Only then did Muruganar realize what was happening. Muruganar's devotion to Bhagavan was so total that when Bhagavan was speaking, his attention got riveted upon Bhagavan's words and he became oblivious to everything else around him. He had to be jolted back to reality by Bhagavan himself. Such incidents reveal the intimacy of the master and the devotee. Is it not wonderful that Bhagavan should engage himself in such delightful sport with his devotees? Chapter 60. Vivekananda, I presume. Bhagavan's presence was a haven of peace. Bhagavan would be reclining upon the sofa in the meditation hall, and devotees would be seated all around the sofa. For the most part, the entire gathering was perfectly silent. Only rarely did someone speak, for only rarely was a need for speech felt at all. Bhagavan and his disciples communed in the vibrant silence which pervaded the meditation hall. When Bhagavan's eyes fell upon us, we would feel electrified. All doubts would vanish and we would sink deep within ourselves. Our absorption in the self was always enhanced by Bhagavan's glance of grace. We were like bees feeding upon the intoxicating nectar of Bhagavan's grace. Once in a while, somebody would ask a question. Bhagavan seldom spoke, and even when he did, there was a great economy of words. In a few words, he would convey great meaning. One day, a young, well-educated man came to Bhagavan, prostrated and sat down. Somehow, we got the impression that the youth was waiting for an opportunity to say something. The serene silence in the hall was soon broken by the young man's voice. He said to Bhagavan, "It is said that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was able to elevate Vivekananda to the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi with just a touch. Can Bhagavan do the same for me?" Bhagavan did not say anything. The young man waited with obvious impatience for Bhagavan's reply. After a few minutes of silence, Bhagavan looked at the youth and in a soft voice asked, "You are another Vivekananda, I presume?" The young man was taken aback. He was at a loss for words. His discomfiture was obvious to everyone in the hall. Clearly incapable of hiding his embarrassment, the young man got up and left the hall without another word. After the young man had left the place, Bhagavan remarked to us, "Nobody appreciates the need for self-analysis and self-criticism. The general tendency is to think of oneself as perfect and to look for opportunities to cast aspersions on the nature of all other people. This boy has no time to examine his own nature. All he could see was his sadhu reclining on a sofa surrounded by a group of reverend disciples. He wanted to see whether I was really worthy of all this reverence. So he took it upon himself to challenge me. Though he was eager to see whether I had the power of Sri Ramakrishna, he was not bothered about whether he himself merited comparison with Vivekananda. That is because he assumed that he himself was perfect. If he had paused to think about his own worthiness, he would never have asked such a question. Sri Ramakrishna bestowed the rare state upon Vivekananda alone, because Vivekananda was a person of rare spiritual merit. To one who is engaged in self-inquiry, all other questions become irrelevant and unimportant. The young man who had initiated this discussion could not derive much benefit because he had already left the place. But Bhagavan's words had a profound effect upon all of us in the hall. Bhagavan often told us that the only way to keep the mind from indulging in criticism of others would be to turn the mind inwards and engage it in self-examination. Similarly, Some people used to study the scriptures and come to Bhagavan with doubts about seemingly contradictory statements made therein. They not only asked for an explanation of the contradiction, but also wanted to know the purpose behind making such confusing statements. Bhagavan would listen to such queries with patience and reply, "Whose is this doubt about the seeming contradictions? Is it the author of the scripture who is confused, or is the confusion in your own mind? Those who made the statements can take responsibility of validating those statements. Why should you worry about that? Try to understand yourself first. When you get to know yourself, you will see that you know everything else as well. As long as you are not sure of yourself, how can you understand the minds of those who wrote the scriptures?" Chapter 61. The Golden Parrot. The Sri Matrabhuteshwara temple was nearing completion. All the preparations for the consecration ceremony were going on at full speed. The temple was being given finishing touches and materials were being gathered for the various homams and other religious ceremonies. To coordinate the various activities connected with the consecration ceremony, a committee was formed. Professor T.K. Dureswami Iyer was one of the members of this committee. He discharged his duties with great sincerity and devotion. Dureswami Iyer and his wife Yogambal were regular visitors to the ashram. They had rented a house in Tiruvannamalai town, and they came to the ashram every morning and evening and spent a lot of time in meditation in Bhagavan's presence. Yogambal was a devotee of the Mother Goddess. She would often invite Bhagavan's devotees to her house and talk to them about their experiences in Bhagavan's presence. She was a very generous lady and she never hesitated to help those in need. Their house was always full of guests. Yogambal had one fond wish. She wanted to have a small golden parrot made and place it in the hand of the goddess in the Matrabhuteshwara temple. So Dureswami Iyer commissioned a jeweler to make a golden parrot of a suitable size. The golden parrot was made and delivered to Dureswami Iyer in due time. That evening, when the couple made their customary visit to the ashram, Yogambal had the golden figure in her hand. After prostrating to Bhagavan, she gave the golden parrot to Bhagavan and said, "This parrot had been made with the idea of placing it in the goddess's hand." Bhagavan took the small figure in his hand and turning it this way and that, admired the delicate craftsmanship. Bhagavan then smiled at the couple and said, "This is a parrot suitable for the goddess to hold in her hand. What a wonderful coincidence! The one who is offering the parrot is Yogambal, and the one who is receiving it is Yogambal too. The deity in the Matrabhuteshwara temple is named Yogambal." By remarking upon this coincidence, the lady was moved to tears. Chapter 62. What can you do about this? Once, a Westerner who was on a visit to the ashram brought a folding canvas chair to the meditation hall. Not being used to sitting on the floor, he had obviously hit upon the idea of using this low chair to enable him to meditate in Bhagavan's presence. As the visitor was unfolding the chair and setting it up, an ashram attendant noticed what was going on. The attendant approached the visitor and told him that it was not the practice to sit on a raised seat in Bhagavan's presence. The visitor felt that it was impossible for him to sit on the floor, so he picked up his chair and left the hall. Bhagavan was watching this and told the attendant, "So, you have done a great service to your master, have you not?" That man was planning to use a chair because he could not sit on the floor. You very cleverly prevented him from acting in such a disrespectful fashion. Now what are you planning to do about this other person who is sitting right above my head? All of us looked up and saw a big monkey perched on the roof of the hall, directly above Bhagavan's head. Until Bhagavan pointed out the monkey, nobody had noticed it. Now all our eyes were upon it. But the monkey was totally unconcerned about the attention it was receiving from the people below. Bhagavan said, "If at all we are able to do it, we try to impose our will upon others. If the other person happens to be stronger, we let him have his way. That is human nature. Why should we concern ourselves with such trivial matters? What difference can it make whether a person sits on the floor or upon a chair? What is high and what is low? Are these not mere concepts? Should we not learn to look beyond these things?" Chapter 63. The Marauding Monkeys. While Bhagavan was staying in the Jubilee Hall, all his animal devotees had the maximum degree of freedom. Monkeys, squirrels, peacocks, dogs, and cows, all of them could come and go as they pleased. Each creature was assured of an affectionate welcome from Bhagavan, and he knew all about them. He would make enquiries about their welfare and would ply them with tasty tidbits. He was aware of their personal preferences and would make sure that each got his favorite snacks. Some of the peacocks had a preference for cashew nuts and would refuse to eat puffed rice. Bhagavan would instruct his attendant to get the nuts from the container, and he would feed them with his own hands. Of all the animals, the monkeys were the boldest. They are mischievous and clever by nature. The Ashram monkeys enjoyed the special privilege of Bhagavan's indulgent affection, and you will understand why the monkeys were able to get away with the most outrageous escapades. Visitors to the ashram would bring fruits, sweets, and other eatables as offerings to Bhagavan. Many an unwary visitor was pounced upon by the monkeys and robbed of the delicacies meant to be offered to Bhagavan. As the devotees and the attendants watched helplessly, Bhagavan would smile mischievously as if to say, "You are no match for my monkey friends." Whenever a devotee brought fruits as an offering to Bhagavan, the fruits would be placed on a stool in front of Bhagavan's sofa. The attendant would put them away safely in a basket. One day, a devotee brought a variety of fruits. This was his first visit to the ashram, and so he did not know about the monkeys. He spread all the fruits on a large tray and was approaching the hall with the tray in his hands when a bold little monkey leapt upon the tray, grabbed a handful of fruits and disappeared into the branches of a tree. This caused quite a commotion, with some people trying to catch the fleeing monkey and others concentrating upon shooing off other potential robbers. Bhagavan heard the noise and looked out. When he saw the clever little monkey running off with his booty, Bhagavan burst into laughter. In amused tones, he remarked, "The monkeys obviously know that they might not get any of the fruits once the tray is brought into the hall. So they must have decided to take their due share while they still had the chance. Now that the monkeys have taken matters into their own hands, what are you going to do?" Once, a devotee brought some fruits to the hall. He placed the fruits on the stool, prostrated to Bhagavan, and went and sat down with the other devotees. The attendant was not in the room at the time, and the fruits remained upon the stool. A small monkey, standing near the screen behind Bhagavan's sofa, was gazing at the fruits with longing in its eyes. It must have been a rather timid monkey, as it hesitated to come forward and snatch up the fruits. Bhagavan saw the little fellow and gave an encouraging nod. As though it had been waiting just for this encouragement, the monkey darted forward, grabbed some fruits, and scrambled up to the thatched roof of the hall. Perched there, safely out of human reach, the monkey was happily feasting on the fruits when the attendant returned to the hall. As soon as the attendant entered the hall, Bhagavan said, "You must thank him for doing you a favor." The attendant was puzzled by Bhagavan's remark. Bhagavan explained, "Somebody brought some fruits. You were not here at the time. Seeing that your job had to be done, he decided to take care of it himself." Saying this, Bhagavan pointed to the monkey on the roof. Then he added, "There is a small difference in the way the two of you go about the job, however. Whereas you would put the fruits in a basket, he chose to put them in his stomach. Anyway, he has disposed of the fruits, and for that you should thank him." One evening, a female monkey entered the hall. A baby was hugging her belly. The monkey approached the basket of fruits beside Bhagavan's sofa. The attendant tried to drive her away. Bhagavan chided the attendant, saying, "She is a mother with a child to feed. Can you not spare a few fruits for her?" But the attendant did not heed Bhagavan's words. Frightened by his threatening gestures, the monkey ran away and climbed up a tree. Bhagavan said to his attendant, "This is all we are capable of. We talk about our reverence for those who have renounced the world. We seek out sannyasins and worship them. But when a true sannyasin comes to us, we drive him away. What does a monkey care for worldly wealth? We humans store food in rooms with strong doors with a lock. What do these monkeys do? They eat whatever they can get and take shelter on some tree at night. Do they save for the future? They do not even develop attachment to their own children. As long as the baby is too young to take care of itself, the mother carries it around wherever she goes. Once the baby is old enough to fend for itself, she just sets him down and lets him go his own way. We are the ones who cling to property and worldly ties. Tell me, who is the real sannyasin, the monkey or the people here? Moreover, this monkey is a female and therefore timid by nature. A male monkey might fight for his rights and snatch away whatever he could, but a female just gives in meekly." Bhagavan then looked at the monkey and beckoned her in soft and gentle tones. The monkey approached and stood before Bhagavan's sofa. He gave it some fruits and the monkey went away happy. Once, a group of young monkeys entered the hall. When chased, they went straight to Bhagavan and scrambled under his sofa as though they knew that nobody could touch them as long as they stayed close to Bhagavan. The attendants hesitated to chase them as they had found shelter under Bhagavan's sofa. The monkeys took full advantage of the situation and went so far as to make faces at the attendants. Bhagavan was amused, and he made it clear that he was on the monkey's side by rewarding the cheeky little creatures with fruits and nuts.
Chapter 64. God alone exists. Those who have realized the self, even when they are engaged in everyday activities, remain uninvolved. They are always in a state of utter stillness. Bhagavan himself has described this in the 30th verse of the supplement to Reality in 40 verses. The mind that is devoid of attachments, though it may appear to be engaged in activity, is in reality inactive. Just like the mind of a person listening to a story might wander off to a faraway place. Once, we were all listening to the radio in the Jubilee Hall. At the end of the program, the names of all the artists were announced. Bhagavan said, "See, the radio sings and gives speeches. It even announces the names of the performers. But there is nobody inside the radio. Our existence is also like that. The body might appear to walk and talk and perform a number of functions. But in fact, there is no individual inside the body. Everything is God. He alone exists." Bhagavan continued, "The concepts of time and space are also imaginary. When we listen to a concert on the radio, are we bothered about the exact time and location at which the concert took place? What difference can it make to our enjoyment of the music? Whether the concert took place in Hyderabad or in Madras, we can listen to the music and derive the same degree of enjoyment sitting right here in this hall." The wise one does not attach any importance to concepts of space and time. One has to go through certain situations in a given lifetime, and for this a body is required. That is the only reason for acquiring a body. He goes through various experiences without getting involved in anything. To an ordinary person, worldly experiences seem real. An ordinary man might think that a liberated person has all the experiences that others have. But the liberated person has no attachment to the body, and therefore physical experiences hold no significance for him. The Jivan Mukta has the same attitude towards his body that a railway porter has for the luggage he carries. Just as the porter carries the luggage up to the stipulated spot and lays it down at that spot, the Jivan Mukta carries the body through the preordained experiences of a lifetime, and at the end of the course he lays down the burden with relief. The porter thinks of the load on his head only as a burden. He does not identify with it on a personal level. That is why he feels no regret when he puts it down. It is the same in the case of a Jivan Mukta. As he never thinks of the body as having any personal significance, he feels no sorrow when the time comes for him to leave the body. During the last days of Bhagavan's earthly life, when his devotees beseeched him to retain the human form for a long time, Bhagavan used to say, "A jnani or a realized soul knows that the sole purpose of acquiring a body is to enable the spirit to attain knowledge through experiences. Do we feel sad because we have to throw away the used leaf plate after a meal? In the same way, a jnani discards the human body without any regret or sorrow." Chapter 65. The Brinjal Stalks. Once, a devotee sent a sackful of brinjals to the ashram. After making a variety of tasty dishes, the remaining brinjals were sun-dried and preserved for later use. The discarded stalks were piled up in a heap in a corner of the kitchen. When Bhagavan saw the heap of brinjal stalks, he said, "Why have the stalks been thrown away? They can be cooked and served as one of the dishes during a meal." One of the kitchen attendants exclaimed, "Bhagavan, how can anybody eat brinjal stalks? The stalks are not edible." Bhagavan did not reply, but took up a knife and started working on the heap of stalks. He removed the outer fibrous sheath and exposed the tender portion within, and proceeded to chop the soft core into tiny pieces. The attendants followed Bhagavan's instructions and set to work on the stalks. Soon they had a basket full of finely chopped brinjal stalks. Early the next morning, Bhagavan entered the kitchen and showed the cook how to cook the brinjal stalks. Bhagavan directed the cook to put a large frying pan on the stove and to fry the chopped pieces in hot oil. The fried brinjal stalk was then mixed with the broken rice which was boiling in a large vessel. When the mixture of brinjal stalk and broken rice had been cooked well, the seasoning was added and the upma for that day's breakfast was ready. Everybody found the breakfast tasty that morning. After having his breakfast, Bhagavan went to the hall. As it was a Sunday, Sub-Registrar Narayana Iyer was in the ashram that day. When Bhagavan saw Narayana Iyer, he made the usual enquiries about his welfare and then asked, "Did you have breakfast this morning?" Narayana Iyer replied, "Yes, I had upma." Bhagavan asked, "Did you notice anything special about today's upma?" Narayana Iyer said, "Yes, it was particularly tasty today. It had a special flavor. I think cabbage had been added to the other ingredients and that gave the upma that special flavor." Bhagavan chuckled. "Cabbage? It was chopped brinjal stalk that you ate." Everyone present was amazed when they heard this. Whoever could have guessed that brinjal stalks could taste so good? Narayana Iyer voiced the belief of all the devotees by saying, "The touch of Bhagavan's hands must have imparted the unique flavor to the dish. The grace of Bhagavan can transform the most unlikely ingredients into a dish fit for the gods." Bhagavan never tolerated wastage. The vegetable peelings and other items which could not be consumed by humans were to be fed to the birds and the animals which frequented the ashram. Nothing was to be thrown away. Bhagavan's frugal nature was obvious in everything he handled. Bhagavan took great care to put paper, pencils, cardboard and other items to optimum use. The methods he adopted to avoid wastage never ceased to amaze and impress his devotees. Once, plantain flowers were being prepared for use in some dish. The outer red skin of the plantain flower is rather tough and is considered inedible. These skins had been removed and thrown into the wastebasket. Bhagavan was on his way to the cowshed when he saw the pile of discarded skins. He remarked to the attendant who was accompanying him, "Look, they have thrown out the portion which is richest in nutritive content. What a waste!" Bhagavan's attendant was intrigued by these words. He asked, "Bhagavan, what nutritive value can there be in the skin of plantain flowers?" Bhagavan replied, "The red outer covering of the plantain flower is rich in fat. See how the inner side of the skin glistens. Ascetics eat the skin so that their body can get the fat required for proper nourishment. Ascetics cannot consume ghee and butter, can they? The skin of plantain flowers can be used as a good source of fat. An additional advantage is that this fat actually helps in developing the capacity for controlling the senses." The attendant recounted this interesting conversation to the ashram cooks. They were curious about the method of cooking the skin of plantain flowers. By coincidence, someone brought a large quantity of plantain flowers to the ashram within a few days. The kitchen attendants requested Bhagavan to show them how to cook the red outer skin covering of the flowers. Bhagavan said, "Soak some red gram, tur dal, in water. Clean the skins and chop them finely. Grind the soaked gram along with salt, red chilies, and asafoetida. Add the chopped skin to this paste and steam the mixture for a few minutes. When the mixture is cooked, remove it from the fire and allow it to cool. Then crumble it and roast the crumbled mixture in hot oil. Season it with mustard seeds and the dish is ready." This preparation can be used as a side dish with rice. The cooks prepared the dish as per Bhagavan's instructions. Everybody found the preparation very tasty and many remarked upon the subtle flavor. The cooks were very happy. However, the next time plantain flowers were brought to the ashram, the cooks felt reluctant to repeat the laborious process of preparation. So, they dug a pit and buried the plantain flower skins at a spot which they thought Bhagavan would not visit. The next morning, when Bhagavan was returning from the cowshed, he saw a wounded dog by the side of the path. He approached the dog and attended to its wounds. After comforting the dog, Bhagavan was about to get back to the path when he noticed the mound of earth. He poked at the mound with his walking stick and soon the plantain flower skins lay exposed. How can anything be hidden from his all-seeing eyes? The kitchen attendants waited apprehensively for Bhagavan's reprimand. But Bhagavan merely said, "If you felt that the preparation of these skins would be too difficult, you could have fed it to the cows. Why bury the skins in the mud? What a waste of good stuff. Okay, do what you like. Why should I bother?" Bhagavan would sometimes tell us what to do, but he never forced us to follow his instructions. It was up to us to absorb his teachings and to benefit from the lessons he taught us.
Chapter 66. Absolute Perfection. It was a festival day and modakams were prepared in the ashram kitchen. Modakam is a sweet prepared in South India as an offering to Lord Ganesha. On that particular day, Shantamma, Sampurnamma, Shankaramma, Lokamma and others were engaged in making the modakams. Each of them had a portion of purnam, which is a jaggery and coconut mixture, in a plate, and they were molding the rice flour into cups and filling the cups with purnam. Each of the ladies worked at her own pace, and so some of them finished their portion of the purnam faster than the others. On his way to the cowshed, Bhagavan entered the kitchen and stood for a few moments watching the ladies at work. The conversation among the ladies included remarks like, "My purnam is over. You have so much purnam with you. Why don't you give me some of your purnam?" And, "Oh, you don't have any purnam left. Why don't you take some of mine?" And, "I have very little purnam left. Please give me some more." etc. After a while, one of the ladies got up, saying, "All my Purnam is over." Bhagavan, who had been listening to the ladies' remarks, smiled at them and said, "You have all been talking about Purnam. One of you said you had too little Purnam, and another said she could spare a little of her Purnam. One lady even remarked that all her Purnam was over. Whatever the context in which it was used, the word retained its meaning. Whether there was too much Purnam or too little Purnam or no Purnam at all, the identity of Purnam or wholeness remain unchanged. This unchanging nature is the mark of everlasting perfection. The ideal of absolute perfection is set out in the benedictory verse of the Isavasya Upanishad thus: "That is the whole, this is also the whole. The whole comes out of the whole. When you remove the whole from the whole, what remains is also whole." This verse tells us about the nature of the universe and its creator. The self remains unchanged, both when it is in its unmanifest state and when it manifests itself as the universe and the creations therein. That which separates itself from the Absolute and manifests itself as the universe is also perfect and whole. That from which the universe is created is also unchanging, immutable, and everlasting perfection. Paradoxical though this might sound, great sages have found this to be the truth. It is this beautiful philosophical idea that Bhagavan expounded to the ladies in the ashram kitchen. By relating philosophical ideas to everyday incidents, Bhagavan made it possible for simple people to grasp the most complex ideas. Chapter 67, Nammalvar. Nammalvar enjoys a special place among the spiritual leaders of the Vaishnavite sect. The Vaishnavite leaders are traditionally classified into two categories, Alvars and Acharyas. Nammalvar enjoys the unique distinction of being considered an Alvar as well as an Acharya. All other Vaishnavite saints are regarded as the various limbs of the great body of Vaishnavism, whereas Nammalvar is said to be the spirit that enlivens the body. If we study the hierarchy of Vaishnavite spiritual leaders, we can see that the first three of them had no earthly existence. They were supernatural beings inhabiting a world beyond ours. Nammalvar was the first of the saints to assume a human form. He is the fourth in the line of Vaishnavite saints and Ramanuja is the 10th. Nammalvar was born in a small village called Alvar Tirunagari in the 9th century AD. Nammalvar's parents, Kariyar and his wife Udayanangai, belonged to the Vellala or farmer community. The couple was childless and prayed to the Lord of Tirukkurungudi to bless them with a child. It is said that Nammalvar was an incarnation of Vishvaksena, one of the celestial beings in Lord Vishnu's retinue. When the child was born, his parents named him Maran. In later life, he came to be known by 10 different names, including Sadagopan, Thirukuruhur Nambi, and Parangusan. As an infant, Nammalvar never drank mother's milk, never cried, and lay inert all the time. In spite of all these peculiarities, however, the baby was quite healthy. Perturbed by their infant son's unusual characteristics, the parents took him to the temple and left him there. Lord Vishnu commanded his attendant Vishvaksena to go and give spiritual initiation to the infant Nammalvar. As soon as he received initiation, Nammalvar went and sat under the tamarind tree in the temple compound and immersed himself in meditation for 16 years. It is said that the celestial serpent Adisesha had taken the form of a tamarind tree in order to provide shelter for the saint. During this period, Madhurakavi, a Brahmin belonging to a village called Tirukkolur in the Pandya kingdom, went on a pilgrimage to North India. While he was in Ayodhya, he became aware of a wonderful light on the southern horizon. Fascinated by this mysterious light, Madhurakavi decided to trace it to its source. The light appeared only during the nights and could not be seen in the daytime. He followed this light through the Godavari region, Thiruvengadam,
and Srirangam. Eventually, he reached Alvar Tirunagari. The light disappeared into the temple there. He questioned the local people and came to know about Nammalvar's birth and the details of his life. Madhurakavi entered the temple and approached the tamarind tree under which Nammalvar was seated and instantly knew that he must be an extraordinary person. Desirous of speaking to the saint, he went close to him and clapped his hands loudly. The noise roused Nammalvar from his contemplation and he opened his eyes. Madhurakavi immediately asked, "If the small one issues from the womb of the cosmos, what would it eat and where would it rest? Siddhin vaitil siriyadu pirandal yettai tindru enge kidakkum." The actual meaning of this rather cryptic question is, if the individual soul issues from the cosmic absolute, how would it sustain itself and where would it find shelter? Nammalvar replied without the least hesitation. It would feed upon that and would reside within that. This means the individual soul will continue to draw sustenance from that, the absolute reality, and would ever reside within that. Attai tindru ange kidakkum. In other words, the individual soul continues to be the absolute and does not really have a separate identity of its own. These were the first words Nammalvar had uttered. It was Madhurakavi's good fortune that Nammalvar's very first words should serve as a valuable lesson in spirituality. When he heard these words, he was overcome by emotion. He fell at Nammalvar's feet and said, "Master, I surrender myself to you. May it please you to make use of your humble servant." Nammalvar accepted him as his disciple and said, "I shall compose some songs which will transport all listeners to the abode of God. It shall be your duty to record these songs on silk fabric." Nammalvar then proceeded to sing the Thiruviruttam, the Tiruvasiriyam, the Periya Tiruvandadi, and the Tiruvaimozhi. These 4 Tamil compositions are considered to be on par with the 4 Vedas for Vaishnavites, and Nammalvar is therefore revered as the one who gave the Tamil-speaking world its own Vedas. The most sacred book of the Vaishnavites is the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, and it contains 1296 songs composed by Nammalvar. All of Nammalvar's compositions were written down by Madhurakavi. Madhurakavi, in addition to recording all of his master's compositions, was responsible for some compositions of his own. The remarkable fact about Madhurakavi is that, whereas all other Vaishnavite saints sang the praises of Lord Vishnu, Madhurakavi sang about the greatness of his spiritual master, Nammalvar alone. In all, Madhurakavi has composed 11 beautiful songs in praise of his Guru. These poems are of such remarkable sweetness that the disciple came to be called Madhurakavi. Once, while in the Jubilee Hall, Bhagavan was talking about how the reality in 40 verses came to be composed. T.K. Sundaresa Iyer asked Bhagavan, "In the reality in 40 verses, the word Ulladu has been used in the context of the reality or the self. Has this particular word been used in the same way by anyone else?" Bhagavan replied, "That which does not exist cannot make an appearance." After a short pause, Bhagavan added, "This particular usage can be seen in Nammalvar's songs." Then, Bhagavan asked Venkataratnam to bring the relevant book and read aloud some of the passages. These passages include the 9th stanza of the Tiruvaimozhi, etc. In every one of these songs, the word Ulladu has been used in exactly the same sense that Bhagavan has used it. Bhagavan continued, "Staunch Vaishnavites seldom quote from Nammalvar's works. This is because many of his works are Advaitic in nature, and so Vaishnavites find it difficult to find support for their theories in Nammalvar's works. In fact, it is said that Vaishnavites often remark that Nammalvar has played a rather cruel trick on them. Nammai keduthan Nammalvan. During the course of his conversations, Bhagavan often referred to Nammalvar's poems. Muruganar, too, made frequent references to Nammalvar's works and often remarked upon the similarities between Nammalvar's statements and Bhagavan's teachings.
Chapter 68, Swami Pranavananda. Swami Pranavananda was one of the earliest devotees to come to Bhagavan. He visited Bhagavan in 1910 in the Virupaksha cave. His integrity and strong spiritual aspirations earned him an enviable place among Bhagavan's devotees. He was one of Bhagavan's intimate companions. His love for Bhagavan was so great that he surrendered himself unconditionally at Bhagavan's feet, relinquishing all worldly attachments, and filled his heart with joy and peace. He was very modest and never spoke about himself, and his speech was restricted to the barest minimum. Though he did not consider himself a teacher, his life itself served as a valuable lesson in spirituality. Pranavananda belonged to the Sarvapalli family, which was highly esteemed in the village of Venkatapuram near Tiruttani in South India. The Sarvapalli family was a stronghold of learning in the Vedas, Sastras and Puranas. The family deity was Lord Yoga Narasimha of Sholingapuram, and Pranavananda was named Narasimham after the family deity. He took the name of Swami Pranavananda at the time of becoming a sannyasi. Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, the world-famous philosopher and one of the most illustrious presidents of India, was Narasimham's nephew. Surprisingly enough, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was esteemed for his erudition and wisdom, was rather dull as a child. His father was very much upset by Radhakrishnan's nature and concerned about his future. Narasimham offered to take the boy to Vellore and take care of his education. Upon reaching Vellore, Narasimham initiated his nephew in the Ramataraka mantram. Constant repetition of this potent mantram resulted in the blossoming of Radhakrishnan's intellect, and he grew into a brilliant student. He joined the Juris College in Vellore and passed his intermediate course. By taking care of Radhakrishnan during the formative years of his life, and by helping him through the initial stages of his academic career, Narasimham can be said to have laid the foundation for Radhakrishnan's success in later life. The Sarvapalli family was not a wealthy one. It is said that though Goddess Saraswati, the goddess of learning, showered her grace upon the family, Goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, looked askance at them. Though they were never reduced to extreme poverty, the family never enjoyed the comforts of affluence. With the intention of acquiring some wealth, some members of the Sarvapalli family migrated to Madras, where they were able to make some money by giving discourses in Sastras and Puranas. Later on, some of the members settled down in Tiruttani. Narasimham was well versed in the three South Indian languages, namely Telugu, Tamil and Kannada. He was also a Sanskrit scholar. Ironically enough, Narasimham did not get through the matriculation examination, but his scholarship in English was remarkable. Englishmen themselves used to marvel at his mastery over the language. Narasimham joined the Arcot Christian College as a teacher. The authorities were so impressed by his scholarship and his capacity as a teacher that they appointed him as the munshi, or a teacher who trained foreigners in the use of local languages, to teach Telugu and English to the members of the mission and the managers of the institutions under their care. Narasimham also trained some of the members of the mission in the techniques of meditation. Some of his students like Paul Adiseshaya and Ida Scudder, who founded the CMC hospital in Vellore, were so impressed by the clarity of thought obtained through meditation that they were prepared to embrace Hinduism if Narasimham advised them to do so. Narasimham did not believe in religious conversions and did not think that only Hindus could benefit from meditation. He declared that one could meditate on God even if one did not profess any religion. He told his students that one could serve mankind and live in peace even if one did not belong to any recognized religion. Narasimham's beliefs and his teachings astonished the authorities of the mission. Narasimha made several visits to the Vellore Central Jail to meet the prisoners and to talk to them about moral values. He initiated the prisoners into the Ramataraka mantram and persuaded them to give up their lawless ways. Through his influence, Narasimham helped in reforming and rehabilitating many of the criminals in the jail. He left the mission because of some difference of opinion with authorities and took up the job of Munshi in the police training college. Many of the Europeans who came to Vellore during that period had the good fortune to learn the local language from Narasimham. Those who were spiritually inclined found an able guide in him, and his classes became very popular satsangs or spiritual congregations. Very soon, Narasimham gained the reputation of a capable teacher and a spiritual guide. While Narasimham was serving as a munshi in Vellore, Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni was working as a Telugu teacher in the same town. In 1910, Narasimham and Ganapati Muni went to Tiruvannamalai and met Bhagavan. At that time, Bhagavan was staying in the Virupaksha cave. In the very first meeting, Bhagavan's look of grace entered deep into Narasimham's heart and destroyed all the doubts that had been troubling him till then. From that moment onwards, Narasimham's heart was full of peace. It was during this period that F. H. Humphreys came to India as an assistant superintendent of police. As soon as he reached Bombay, he fell ill and had to be hospitalized. Upon being discharged from the hospital, he came to Vellore. He reached Vellore on March 18th, and Narasimham went to him on the same day to start the Telugu classes. As soon as he saw Narasimham, Humphreys asked him whether he knew any astrology. Narasimham said he did not. Humphreys then requested Narasimham to get him a particular book on astrology. Narasimham obtained the book from the local library. The next day, while returning the book, Humphreys asked Narasimham whether he knew any Mahatmas or great souls in Vellore. Narasimham did not feel like divulging any such information to an inquisitive foreigner, and so he said that he did not know anyone. At their next meeting, Humphreys said, "Why, Munshiji, you told me you did not know any Mahatmas in this town. But last night I saw your guru in my dream. He was sitting beside me and saying something, but I could not understand him. You were the first person I saw in my dream while I was in Bombay, and I felt that you would lead me to my guru." Narasimham replied, "I have never travelled beyond Guntakal. I never went to Bombay." Humphreys then gave a detailed description of the vision he had had while lying in the hospital in Bombay. He said that even as he lay upon the hospital bed in Bombay, he had gone to Vellore in his astral body. He had seen some people in Vellore, and Narasimham was the first person he saw. Narasimham was impressed by the yogic powers of his new student, but he wanted to test him further. When Narasimham came to teach Humphreys that afternoon, he brought some pictures of Bhagavan, Ganapati Muni, Seshadri Swami, and some others. He put these pictures on the table, and without meeting Humphreys or giving him any kind of explanation, he went to teach another student. When Narasimham returned, Humphreys was waiting for him eagerly. Holding out Ganapati Muni's picture, Humphreys said, "This is the person I saw in my dream yesterday. Is he not your guru? Please tell me the truth." Narasimham was amazed, and he admitted that it was indeed the picture of his guru, Sri Ganapati Muni. Narasimham had become Ganapati Muni's disciple in 1906, and the Muni had explained Bhagavan's teachings and trained him in the method of self-inquiry as taught by Bhagavan. A fortnight later, Humphreys fell ill again. He was sent to Udagamandalam, Ooty, to recuperate. While in Ooty, Humphreys kept up a regular correspondence with Narasimham. After returning from Udagamandalam, Humphreys sketched the picture of a cave with a mountain spring at its entrance and a Muni standing in front of the cave. He showed the picture to Narasimham and told him that it was the representation of what he had seen in his dream the previous night. Humphreys asked Narasimham whether he could identify the sage in the picture. Narasimham was amazed to see that Humphreys had drawn a picture of Ramana Maharshi standing in front of the Virupaksha cave. When he was told about this, Humphreys expressed the desire to meet Bhagavan. Humphreys had been asking Narasimham to take him to meet Ganapati Muni. It so happened that Ganapati Muni came to Vellore around that time. The Muni was on his way to Tiruvannamalai and had stopped in Vellore because he had been invited to give a discourse in the Theosophical Society there. While he was in Vellore, Narasimham took Humphreys to meet him. When the Muni resumed his journey to Tiruvannamalai, Humphreys took a day's leave from work and accompanied the Muni and Narasimham to Tiruvannamalai. Thus, it was that Humphreys had his first darshan of Bhagavan in the Virupaksha cave in the year 1911, and Narasimham was instrumental in bringing about this momentous meeting. While he was teaching Telugu to the officials in the police department, Narasimham used to translate several spiritual texts, including the Ramayana, for the benefit of his students. The Englishmen were highly impressed by Narasimham's mastery of their language and his lucid style. They held him in high regard both for his scholarship and for his spiritual achievements. Most of Narasimham's students were very wealthy people in important, influential positions. But Narasimham treated all his students equally without fear or favor. He made no demands, but the Englishmen used to send a motor buggy to pick him up from his house and to drop him back after classes. The chauffeur used to salute Narasimham as though he were the governor. Very rarely was such reverence shown to an Indian during the days of the British Raj. Though he was just a teacher of local languages, Narasimham commanded the respect of a large number of foreigners. Though Narasimham had originally accepted Ganapati Muni as his guru, he was proud to declare himself as a devotee of Bhagavan Ramana. He led a very simple life, but he never hesitated to help those in need. Though his was a very modest house in a crowded street named Avalkaran Veedi, there were at least 10 students staying with him at any given time. He boarded them with free of charge, and his wife fed them all with loving concern of a mother. Narasimham had no male issue. This fact did not bother him, but his wife longed for a son. One day she requested Ganapati Muni to bless her with a male child. With the Muni's blessings, a baby boy was born, but he did not survive beyond early childhood. Narasimham's wife was an ardent devotee of Lord Yoganarasimha of Sholingapuram, and she often visited his temple on the Gadikachalam hill. Late one evening, while she was sitting in meditation behind the idols of the Sapta Rishis or the 7 sages, the temple priests, who had not noticed her, locked up the temple for the night and went home. The lady claimed that on that occasion, Lord Yoganarasimha himself brought her out of the locked temple and sat her on the steps leading up the hill. Narasimham had no special feeling towards his family deity, Lord Yoganarasimha. His whole concentration was on the Vichara Marga, or path of self-enquiry, as taught by Bhagavan. In course of time, Narasimham renounced the world and became a sannyasi, assuming the name of Swami Pranavananda. However, the ritual was a mere formality, as Narasimham had always been a sannyasi at heart, living a life of detachment and devoting his time to spiritual pursuits. Pranavananda considered Bhagavan the very personification of the Vedas and the Upanishads, and so he had great love and reverence for him. Bhagavan too had a special regard and concern for Pranavananda. The following anecdote serves as an illustration of Bhagavan's concern for him. Pranavananda used to compile Bhagavan's teachings into books. One of the devotees owned a printing press, and he printed the books that were brought to him by Pranavananda. One hot summer afternoon, Pranavananda was returning to Tiruvannamalai with a copy of one of the books. He had just 1 rupee with him, and not wanting to engage a bullock cart, he decided to walk to Ramanashram. He somehow made it to the gate of the ashram, but the terrible heat had taken its toll. Pranavananda could not proceed any further. He sat down in the shade of a tree for a short rest before entering the ashram. At that moment, Bhagavan happened to look out of the window. Seeing Pranavananda's exhausted attitude, Bhagavan immediately came out to him. Sitting down beside him, Bhagavan poured cool water over Pranavananda's sore feet and spoke to him in gentle, compassionate tones, saying, "Why do you put yourself to such strain? Did I ever ask you to go out in this heat?" Such was the Master's concern for his disciples' welfare. Pranavananda was instrumental in printing several books of Bhagavan's teachings. He priced these books at half an hour or 1 anna and gave them to the ashram. It was his desire that Bhagavan's teachings should be made available to the maximum number of people at affordable cost. It was Pranavananda who first translated Bhagavan's Who Am I, Vichara Sangraham, Vivekachudamani and Devi Kalotram into Telugu. His style was very simple and lucid. In addition to these translations, Pranavananda also wrote several original books, including Ramana Maharshi Charitramu, Advaita Bodhadipika, Tattvamali Dhyanamu, Sri Guru Anugraha Avataramu, Deepamu Chudandi, and Sri Ramanasuti Patalu. For Pranavananda, spirituality was not mere intellectual exercise, but the very way of life. From his childhood, he had great faith in the Ramataraka mantram. He used to impart this mantram to his students so that their hearts and their brains could acquire clarity and brilliance. He used to teach the Ramayana to his students, and they learned to appreciate and admire this priceless epic. One day, Bhagavan was sitting on the veranda with some devotees. Suddenly, a crow flew in at great speed and fell at Bhagavan's feet. Bhagavan picked it up and stroked its feathers gently. He saw that the crow was mortally wounded and tried to revive it, but it died in Bhagavan's lap. Some Siddha Purusha has left his body today, said Bhagavan, and gave instructions for entombing the dead crow. While this was going on, Pranavananda came to the ashram. Upon seeing him, Bhagavan said, "The entombment of the crow is over." All the other devotees seemed to be impressed by the gravity of the moment, but Pranavananda remained unmoved and said to Bhagavan, "Why should Bhagavan expect us to be impressed by this incident as though it is some great achievement? Is it really such a wonderful thing to have happened?" Everyone was taken aback by Pranavananda's inexplicable reaction, but Bhagavan remained grave and dignified. Suddenly, Pranavananda broke into tears and said, "Why, Bhagavan, is this really a great deed that you have done now? Did you not grant liberation to Jatayu in the last yuga? Now you have done the same for a crow. There is nothing strange about this. It is just a routine affair for someone like you." Hearing this, the devotees were moved by Pranavananda's devotion to Bhagavan and his unshakable faith in Bhagavan's divine nature. Bhagavan himself looked on silently as though he accepted everything. Once, Pranavananda asked his grandson Hari Prasad to attend Bhagavan's Jayanti celebrations. He instructed the boy to get up early in the morning, have his bath and take his breakfast with Bhagavan, and to leave immediately for Giri Pradakshinam. As the boy was about to leave, Pranavananda slipped a letter into his pocket and told him to give it to Bhagavan. Hari Prasad followed his grandfather's instructions. He woke up early in the morning and had his bath. Then he went and prostrated to Bhagavan. Bhagavan inquired about the welfare of all the family members and told Hari Prasad to have the idlis and chutney that had been prepared for the day's breakfast. While he was eating, Hari Prasad told Bhagavan that he wanted to set out on Giri Pradakshinam immediately after breakfast. Bhagavan said, "First of all, let me read the letter your grandfather has written to me," and he took the letter from the boy's pocket. Bhagavan asked for one more idli to be served to the boy and read the letter while Hari Prasad finished his breakfast. The letter contained the information that the Maharaja of Mysore was planning to visit Ramanashram. Even though the boy had forgotten his grandfather's instructions, Bhagavan made sure that the letter was handed over to him. Pranavananda had an ashram in Gudivada in Guntur district of Andhra Pradesh. However, he stayed in Vellore most of the time. Kurumani Narayana Sastri, a devotee of Bhagavan, also stayed in Vellore, and he was a close associate of Swami Pranavananda. He was devoted to both Bhagavan and to Seshadri Swami. Kurumani Sastri came to Bhagavan while Bhagavan was living on the hill. At the very first meeting, he surrendered himself to Bhagavan. There is an interesting story about Kurumani Sastri. It is as follows. Kurumani Sastri had written an abridged version of Valmiki's Ramayana in English prose. He wanted to have the first reading of the completed work in Bhagavan's presence. Accordingly, he started up the hill with his manuscript and a big bunch of bananas as an offering for Bhagavan. On the way, he saw a Vinayaka temple and offered a few bananas from the bunch to Lord Vinayaka. This was done mentally. He did not actually remove the fruits from the bunch and leave them in the Vinayaka temple. Kurumani Sastri went up the hill and prostrated to Bhagavan and laid the bunch of bananas before Bhagavan. The usual custom was for the attendant to put away all offerings safely until they were distributed among the devotees at an appropriate time. When the attendant came to remove the bananas, Bhagavan stopped him, saying that the fruits offered to Lord Vinayaka had yet to be removed from the bunch. The attendant and the other devotees were puzzled. Kurumani Sastri was stunned. He told the gathering that it was indeed true that he had mentally offered a few fruits to Lord Vinayaka on the way up the hill, but had forgotten to separate those fruits from the bunch. Everybody was amazed at Bhagavan's omniscience. Before Sastri even mentioned the purpose of his visit, Bhagavan himself said, "Sastri, why don't you start reading the Ramayana?" Sastri was even more amazed than before. It was as though Bhagavan had photographed Sastri's mind and could see every detail in it. One day, Pranavananda asked his grandson Hari Prasad to fetch Kurumani Sastri. As soon as Sastri reached their house, Pranavananda asked him to recite Rudra Namakam and Chamakam along with him. At the end of this recitation, Pranavananda closed his eyes and repeated Hari Om. With the Lord's name on his lips, he merged with the divine. Thus ended Pranavananda's glorious life. Pranavananda merged with Bhagavan in the year 1969, and his mortal remains were entombed on the banks of the river Palar in Vellore. Though Pranavananda is no more with us, his memory lives on through the numerous books he has written.